Good morning, beautiful people of the internet. Jay was making me laugh before we started, so I'm not losing it. Although I am in this heat. It's 45 degrees in Malta. Yes, exactly. So let's hope I don't overheat today. Anyway, welcome. Good morning. Hope you've all had your coffee and you are ready to kind of dive in, ask some questions. We're going to kick off with Adam and his update of the Sunday supplement. A really, really great one today. Loads of stuff to discuss in that. So obviously we've got Adam and we've got Jay, who's taken over Piotr's role of tech again and smashing it. Woo! And so, yeah, Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to report it's 14 degrees here in Yorkshire, where I am for the week, so a little bit different. And had a look at the rain forecast for today, and it's 100% up until lunchtime. Then it moves down to 98% with some 95% in the afternoon. So I'm I'm pretty sure you got the best end of the deal there, H. I hope you got some good aircon though. As long as you got some good aircon, you're okay.
Some full.
I bet it is. So. Yeah, bit of medicine in the supplement this week. I mean, first of all, yes, definitely we had a better week in terms of those who are sweating the mortgage rates pretty hard at the moment. You know, it's been, I think, probably 3 or 4 weeks since we've had any really good news of note, although the unemployment figures did help. But this week it really has moved on a bit because our biggest fears around core inflation at least look like they might have gone over the hump. That's the hope anyway. So again, looking at where the US were and where they when it got over their sort of peak in core inflation, that's about 12 months ago. We printed a 6.9, which was below expectations, and that was the key. Yes, CPI was down. It's under 8%. It's kind of crackers that 8% below 8% is in this big victory. But the important thing was that the expectations were 8.2 and the print was 7.9. And that was the key. So 2 really good pieces of news there in general for rates anyway. Does it look like economic slowdown? Yeah, it does. Pretty much services inflation that I was talking about a few weeks ago, which is really driving. It's the one really big positive component of CPI at the moment. And it's 47% of CPI. So it's ridiculous that it isn't really talked about more. But that also a couple of points shaved off services inflation as well, which helped with CPI. So below expectation is the key. Hopefully it means a below expectation print next month, but it depends how the forecasts get updated because we're guaranteed this little drop off in July's figures because the energy cost came down for households because of the price cap, which will definitely be a help to all of those who are still stuck on variable tariffs after they haven't really been able to fix for the best part of 2 years. I know some will have already started fixing again, but the electricity futures are much more reasonable than they were. So not the worst. You know, we hopefully over the next sort of week, 10 days, see some products out that are at more competitive rates than they have been. Although obviously there will be eyes on the next Bank of England meeting. Bad news for those who are on base rate trackers. I think this is not enough for the Bank of England to stop their cycle. I think 0.25 is still highly likely at the next meeting. It will put them in an interesting position because what has changed, I've updated my forecast from 90% likelihood of hitting 6% base at some point in the next 12 months to 70% likelihood. So we're still odds on, but by no means the penalty kick that it was. And if we saw another couple of pullbacks, who knows? They'll be watching the unemployment figures most carefully because the one thing the bank doesn't want to do is carry the can for spoiling the economy. And look, we've got an election coming up, so they're going to they're going to live under the bus for some of it because otherwise the Conservatives have got to blame themselves, and we all know that's not happening. I did a little piece this week on Labour, kind of upsetting a lot of diehard Labour fans by rowing back on a lot of their economic pledges. I've been saying for months and months that the one thing that Labour have got to navigate in this upcoming election is just to explain where the bloody hell they're going to get the money from for all these promises. And they've done something really sensible. They've started dropping all these promises. And in reality, I think it explains it probably best in, I don't remember the name of the documentary, the sort of mockumentary in a way, but it's where Benedict Cumberbatch plays Dominic Cummings talking about Brexit, and they go through the whole process. But it is an interesting, what they do get right in that very much is that these sort of things are won in the middle. You know, they're not won at the fringes. You know, the die-hard Labour people will vote Labour regardless. They'll moan about it. That's what's going to happen. Die-hard Tories, exactly the same on the other side. They're going to vote either way, which is and why I find Sunak a little bit frustrating in terms of how much he panders to the hard right of the party, because those people aren't going somewhere else. You've just got to have the stones to not try and please all the people all of the time. That is just the nature of the job, right? Just get on with it and do it day by day. That's what it is to be, you know, in the C-suite at number 10, you know. But they'll win the election in the middle, and in the middle, and I like to consider myself relatively in the middle, trying to be objective. What they're doing looks pretty sensible to me at the moment, in terms of we're not going to be able to afford to do this, that, and the other straight away. The difficulty in anger that they will have is that in '97 they took over an economy growing at 3.5% a year, where inflation was under control and unemployment was coming down after a ropey time in the '90s. Whoever wins the next election will take over an economy that is growing at probably around about 0% a year, that's struggling with productivity, that's struggling with wage demands going up, even in a time where, you know, productivity isn't and is struggling to go forward, and is not in healthy shape, and has already got a pretty significant debt burden. So it's not going to be anywhere near the blue sky space that there was in '97. But there we go. And then I framed this week's supplement as tough love, because I'm getting lots of people, and I understand, you know, where the difficulties are coming from. I tried to put it into context this week. A lot of people go around in this game saying it's all about the deals and the money. You know, I've always felt that's a little bit incomplete in terms of its analysis, because just because you can get the deal and get the money doesn't mean you can be a property developer, right? You've got to do it. You've got to deliver the product. And if you're going to hold on to stuff, you've got to be able to manage it, you know, competently at the very least. So that's what rounds off that conversation. But in 2021, getting the money was dead easy. People throwing you dirt cheap money, right? Getting the deals was hard, right? Really quite hard. Lots of people didn't do a lot in 2021 because getting the deals was so hard. Our deal volume was down significantly on 2019, for example, and it remained that way in 2022 as well. It's been hard to pick that up. Now the deal flow, the volume is huge. It's difficult to know where to spend your time on the right conversations, as we've talked about before. But the financial structures are completely turned on its head. It's very difficult unless you're sitting on huge piles of cash or throwing off huge piles of cash from property or other existing businesses. It's kind of difficult. But you know what? That's just the nature of the beast, and you've got to get on with it. So if you're struggling on the money raising side, then I've had a few paragraphs on, you know, equity versus debt and sharing equity in these situations, getting a different structure in there so people aren't expecting money in the now, and you can do some of these deals, and really starting with the vendor, because if the vendor wants to get stuff sold at the moment, depending on the size of the deal, depending on your skill set, experience level, knowledge base, etc., your network, depending on all of that, and depending on the vendor's situation, of course. But it's regular, the conversation at the moment, and actually more than half the time in the serious conversations I've had over the past 4 weeks, they're volunteering it up before we even ask, because they understand how important it is. So if that's not there, you really probably got to consider sharing equity. And as I said to I think Jay quite enjoyed, don't want to share equity, do better deals, right? Exactly. Simple as that. That's why it's tough love. Right? But
sorry,
go on, John.
You'll move on to a very brilliant, valid point next. But I just want to just touch on two things that have happened in the last 3 weeks. The first one is I did a post on LinkedIn. It's probably, in terms of interactions, like people commenting and liking, it's not the best. But in terms of impressions, it's over 5,000 impressions. That's the number of people that have read it and done nothing with it, which is frustrating, but it's real. And what I did was, it was basically, I took some of the information from Essential Information Group's newsletter and basically said, this is a complete polarity shift, right? In 2020, 2021, we were talking about the inflated house prices being a result of reduced supply, increased demand, right? Because people were chucking cheap money at you and you just couldn't find a deal for love nor money. Now we're seeing in auction, the number of lots have increased year on year by 20%.
Ooh.
The number of sales has dropped by 10%. That's a 30-point swing, right? That's huge, right? So just to kind of marry up with what you had said there. And on a secondary point, in the last 6 days, I've had 2 people that I know, that I like, and on certain levels, I trust, right? Both approach me and say, hi, mate, can you do me a favor? Can you connect me to Helen Chorley? Right? One of them is a trader, does pretty decent deals, does deals with you, Adam. I don't know if that's a private thing or a public thing, but nice enough guy. He's like, I'm wanting to do more trades instead of more buy and holds, and I need more liquidity to be able to do that. And I've met Helen before, I've spoken to her before, but it would be good to have like an updated chat with her. Can you just facilitate that? I said, how much is it going to cost you? Is the first question. And the second is from a developer that I've known for quite some time. And he said, look, I'm away at the moment. Would you? We're connected on socials with Helen, but could you introduce us and see if there's anything we can do? I said, yeah, sure, no problem at all. How much will it cost you? But no, so it just goes to show that people are now really very seriously looking at working with people rather than working with institutional cash. And I think that's a really big change. And the final point,
it's nice to be popular.
It's super popular, Helen. I honestly thought the core inflation drop shocked me, not because it was that large of a swing, but when you consider that the income increases, the government wage increases for doctors, nurses, and anyone else that's been striking recently, I kind of thought, well, the government funding those income increases, I thought that was going to affect inflation, but it doesn't seem to have, like, negatively, obviously, but it doesn't seem to have. Maybe it will. Maybe it will kick in, but
I think that hit quite hard in April and May, right? But I think probably, look, often the best example, the best evidence is right in front of you, and it's the simple explanations, right? I think June was exceptionally good weather month for the UK, and that tends to see people take more holiday, right, and be a bit less productive, especially we know as well. I mean, look, it's now July, and as I said, it's 14 degrees and it's raining all day, right? We know when it gets sunny in England, we need to take those opportunities and get out there and get to the beach or whatever, yeah? So I think it might just be something as simple as that. But I was pleasantly surprised because I thought core had a little bit more juice in it before we got to the peak. So fingers crossed that July's print is 6.8 or below, and then we really got what looks like a top, as the traders would say.
You actually mentioned that in the supplement as well, didn't you, about these seasonal summer spending?
Oh yeah, I don't have to say that. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, that not being or that not contributing as much. And quite frankly, if it continues at 14 degree and rain, that ain't going to change either. Yeah,
indeed. I think we've got it's interesting because the market as a whole, I think the auction market will be dead interesting in August, Joe. Really, really do, because it normally, to be honest, August starts about today, realistically, in the auction calendar, if not a couple of days ago, because we've had the Friday where pretty much now everyone's broken up from school. So we are in official summer holiday mode and people haven't necessarily got there. It just takes bidders out of the pool. It takes players out of the auction pool, and we have to sit and wait and see what transpires. And I think it'll be interesting to hear, because from a few agents, I've heard that, the quality stuff is absolutely still selling. Solihull market still looks pretty damn healthy. Things that are there that are remotely realistically priced are transacting well. I think the gap is where, interestingly, where I thought the gap was going to be when COVID started, because at the bottom end of the market with the higher yields, I still saw those performing quite well. The sort of second step slash middle to lower end of the middle class properties I saw struggling, and they didn't struggle at all. They absolutely flew off the shelves. But I think now they are struggling, because I think that's where inflation has bitten quite hard in there. And also, you know, the lack of increase in the tax bands also bites quite hard in terms of real money and what's being delivered. So I think you're going to have by the time we get to the end of this year, you'll have a really interesting pattern in terms of house prices and what they've done, because there's reasons to be relatively flat rather than think things are going to go too much further downward if we've seen the top in court, if we've now seen it. So let's see. But I think that was that's probably the cliff notes pretty much done. I think hopefully there's some useful stuff in there. I did start talking a bit more about a lot of the point of today, really, in the juice of it, was to reframe people's mindsets around the capital stack side of it. I think one of the reasons, maybe, Jane, why those two intros to Helen are also existing is, you know, the theoretically, I had a situation it's played out over the last 2 weeks where a bridger, who shall remain nameless, but they know who they are, who has stood up at one of our partners in property meetings before and given a case study about a particular kind of deal, then couldn't deliver on that deal for me, or refused to deliver on that deal for me in the same way that they have done in the past. And this is reflective of, now, I got told by that bridger, I've done 168 bridges with them, right? So pretty reasonably weighed down the track with that relationship, you would think. But they're just a bit nervy at the moment. And then, of course, the inevitable, well, it's going to go elsewhere then. Oh, well, we'll see what we can do. It's like, why do I have to threaten? But I'm not the person who goes, you know, when people go, oh, come back to me if you get a better quote and I'll match it. It's like, but I'm definitely not going to come back to you, am I? Why would I come back to you in that situation? Why would I do that? It's not going to happen. So actually went off and got a better deal somewhere else anyway. So it's like, well, there you go. And they're like, oh, well, where's that deal come from? Well, is it in my best interest to tell you? Don't think it is, really. So off we go. Try again.
Oh, it's a very short-termist view, isn't it? Very transactional, given and kind of like odd in the context of 168 deals. Like if you're 3 deals in, okay. Like it's
the thing that I had another situation this week which is far more positive, where, because it's quite it'd be the biggest deal we've ever done by a long way, the current existing portfolio, which has got a loan with Lloyds Bank on it at the moment, and it's a 8-figure loan, so we're talking corporate loan team stuff. Spoke to the relationship manager, and goodness me, that was one hell of a conversation that had me on my toes. You know, really, really good conversation. But what's interesting is it's also got a low rate loan on it at the moment, fixed for another nearly 2 years. And because that loan's, luckily, because Lloyds operate the way they do, that loan is well in the money. And one of the parts of the capital stack for that deal is cashing in that loan, which might sound silly, right? But hear me out, and kicking the term out for 10 years, right? Because cashing in the low rate fixed loan, that's so far in the money that the bank will actually pay the company for cashing the loan in, right? So they're delighted, and part of the plan would be, you know, asset management to get the rents. A, they're underlet, pretty standard story in a portfolio takeover, but B, they're in areas where the rents are moving forward very, very quickly, and I'd expect very decent rent growth over the next 2 to 3 years, and then move back into a more regular cycle in terms of, you know, a couple of % a year or whatever. But what that means is there's vendor finance involved there as well, so a fairly significant slab of it. But it was another few quid to chuck into the mixer by cashing in the value of an in the money loan. So what I wanted to do this came to me in a what an alcoholic would call a moment of clarity, I think. Is I wanted to kick out to like a 20-year fix, right, or more. And what I was gonna suggest was we short the time till the loan expiry, the fixed loan expiry, because we could basically arbitrage that, and then we'd have the fixed loan for the rest of the period.
Yeah.
And because of the shape of the yield curve at the moment, in theory, we would have a lower rate to pay. But the problem is, in the 20-year market, I mean, the bank aren't flexible enough to allow that, right? Lloyds aren't flexible enough to get with that. But B, the liquidity lack in those sorts of markets means that the premiums on the swaps are much higher, the brokerage commissions are much higher, and therefore stick to the 10-year because that's the best you're going to get. And you're knowing at some point, I know people would look at that and go, yeah, but in 3 years' time, and interesting enough, the number I got quoted, by the way, given the size of the loan for a 10-year, was 4.75 on the day, which is, acceptable. And that's why sometimes it's better to do things at big volume than, because none of us are getting, I don't think many people are getting any 4.75 at the moment on a limited company fix, right? So very favourable. There are, of course, a lot of terms that come with that, but it's playing about with the serviceability side of it. Really, really a maths problem that took myself and my business partner working on that one, who is a first-class maths graduate, brilliant mathematician, and it took us a few hours and a couple of coffees and all the rest of it to try and work around that. But those sorts of non-vanilla approaches to the capital, it doesn't have to be that size of deal. If we do that deal, then amazing, but we did a deal, of 5% of that size, but with the vendor effectively financing the deposit. No particular issue. Everybody was comfortable because the vendor was willing to take sort of 4 or 5% on their money for some time. They were happy.
But that's the beauty, I think, of talking about examples like this. And I was really excited about this morning's chat, because it shows the creativity and what is possible when you look at things from different angles. Like in the past, we've talked about maybe it's worth biting the bullet, paying the early redemption fee to lock in rates. I mean, not now, but what we spoke about kind of earlier in the year, which for some people, if you have a very traditional kind of approach, you're like, God, I would never take that penalty. But you're like, actually, when you look at the maths of it and you work out the numbers over a longer term, or kind of a broader perspective, actually that was the sensible thing for some people to do. Take that, because actually you're going to win on the rate. And that's the importance of learning about this stuff, listening to things like this, going to Partners in Property or any of the meetups where people are talking about kind of non-standard ways of looking at things, to open your mind up to actually other things are possible. And obviously I loved it that you mentioned the capital stack in there, and that people are looking for different ways to structure things as well. And you gave great examples. Honestly, please, if you are working with investors, do go and read that today, because Adam touches on it, and there's a lot more to be said. I'll try and reshare my capital stack post, which is probably a couple of years old now, but it's still relevant if you don't understand that, or drop me a note and I can send that to you.
No, absolutely, it'll be evergreen, and it's a really good point, well made, Helen. It's a lot of the industry, especially around the educational side of the space, talks about mindsets and delayed gratifications and stuff, and that's all it is when it comes down to the numbers side of it, right? What's been blown apart in the last 6 months is the idea that the mortgage rate is the pay rate on the debt, right? It's just not. You've got to consider the arrangement fees. You've got to consider what the early redemption stuff is. You've got to consider all of that before you understand what the cost of debt is. And if you there's some people I know who are still convinced that the interest rate is going to whip right back down to zero relatively quickly. I do disagree with them, but of course, their viewpoints are interesting. But when people say to me, "What will you do if it does?" It's like, well, break these and then refix at a lower rate when the maths, when the numbers work. The point with the example I just gave is at 4.75, it works 10 years, guaranteed problem, right? In that 10 years, we can be quietly confident, let's say, that the market's going to go up at least 30%, right? Let's stick with 30%, yeah? So we know at the end of that how much extra money we're going to have, and we know where the rent growth is going to be. So what have we done? Well, we've taken out the biggest risks, haven't we? We've insured against the biggest risks, and at the moment, because the yield curve is inverted, we're paying a lower rate for that privilege. And if after 6 years, the base is 0.1 again, or for whatever reason, then we can always break and refix. Why not? And fix for another 10 years. It's just cost of debt.
Certainty. Like some people, I guess a lot of people don't really look at like a longer term, unless it's, well, from an investment perspective, don't necessarily look that long. But what you've got is certainty. And if you know what your cash flows are and your expected cash flows are, then that's the beauty of that. And I think sometimes people underestimate the value of that certainty. You know what it is, you know what you've got, right, let's manage for the rest. And when there's already room, as you've said, to increase rates there on rents, to increase those because they are suboptimal at the moment, then yeah, beautiful example.
Yeah. And it's that trying to understand you don't have to be at 100% debt or 100% equity. Again, a lot of the training around this side of things, unfortunately, is a bit too simplistic, and it doesn't really get into the nuances of what I gave an example of where you might be 70% senior debt, 25% private investor, 5% your own money. Right, might be quite a common situation for a developer who's got a good track record and people who want to invest in them. And you can, if there are so many ways to do it, but instead of preference shares that pay a coupon day one, there might be a deferred coupon. There might be rolled up interest. There's all sorts of ways in which these things can be done. You just need to know how to curate them in the right way. And you need to use all the tools in your toolbox. That was part of today's point, right? And the tools in the toolbox have changed over the last few years quite quickly. We had a flash of a Dom comment. Even I couldn't read it that quick, Jay. Come on, let's go. Oh,
your second time? No, you didn't get it then. No. One more. Just pay attention.
Oh wow! After your perfect tech performance last week. Oh, there we go. Fourth time lucky, as they say. Nice. I mean, personally, I don't mind. I don't mind EDC. Depends how much the 120k costs you in terms of what you've got in the locker or other deals you might be able to do. If you own it, I mean, it's pretty penalty kick, and because most of the money's in the purchase rather than the development, you could bridge market value bridge. Right. Well, get on with it. Get on with it.
Yeah, I think that solves your problem, Dom. I think it's an option one, the purchase with a bridge.
The only thing that's missing is current value, Dom. Really, that because it's what is current market value,
and also expected time.
And is this a full refurb project with or without planning? Does it require planning? Is it a change of use thing? Or is it just vanilla kind of resi house that needs a spruce?
I mean, I think that's a good point. I'd guess right. So I'd also say what you've left out that's interesting in terms of, you see, what I wouldn't do is control it on an option / do an assisted sale if I was putting 120 grand into it, which you haven't put up as one of your options. But I do see people do stuff like that and think it's too weak. You got to at least exchange. Yeah, So what are they going to lend you against the 450, Dom? 70%. So like what's 135 or 450? 315. 315, something like that. I mean, if the vendor's willing to fund the refurb, you know, great. Won't give the vendor too many clues. They might just do it themselves. But yeah, good question. You can't really, that kind of what I like about an example like that is what it shows you is that when you've got a good deal, then the conversation around exactly how you deliver it from a financial perspective is solely about optimization. You know you've got to do it, and you want to do it as quickly as possible. And if the bridge is going to be the fastest way, given that the deal stacks up really quite as well as it does. I mean, what are we talking? 420 over 700 plus some costs. What we're saying, 450 for a 250 margin. I mean, it's a very, very healthy profit. What profit on cost? 55%, something like that, 56%.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's the sort of stuff you just need to be. And I always think it depends how hard it is, but how hard these deals are to come by and what sort of capacity you've got. But staying liquid, because there's so much juice in it, you know, borrowing. This is kind of my do better deals, right? That's the sort of example of a deal I'm telling people to do better deals. And I choose to stay liquid personally as much as possible. I always do. There's plenty there in the table. There's plenty on the table there. So if you're sharing some of it out by making sure you're funded and keep your 120 grand in the bank, then I'd do that. Vendor or private individual or development funder. Bridges 995% a month. I think there's a decimal point in there. Yeah. Otherwise that's probably the only way to ruin such a good deal, right?
You went to the same broker you went to, apparently. There.
I mean, talk about a marketing figure. 0.995%. If it said 0.997%, I'd think you were trying to wind us up, Dom. 2% months 8 to 11. Yeah, and that's a bit of a risk, isn't it? Because what happens at rollover as well, because that's quite penurious. And one of the reasons why I think one of the other reasons I mentioned today about why it's great to be, and why there's also more opportunities for the Helens in the world out there at the moment, is because the shadow banking sector steps in when the banking sector doesn't deliver, and the banking sector is not delivering. It's too slow. And this is happening at all sorts of. We're 13 months into one with a particular bank. You know who you are, Mr. and Mrs. Bank. And yeah, we're stuck on 4.25 over base rather than the 4.25% fixed that they've offered us 13 months ago, and we're still at least 8 weeks from completion. So when that mortgage comes out, and it's a big loan, it's just setting fire to money because of their inefficiency, and I find it so very, very frustrating. But you are where you are. What are you going to do? Torch the 4.25% that you got 13 months ago? Rocks and hard places spring to mind, but suboptimal, I think, would be the generous way of saying it.
The thing about that bridge is it's again why I asked about timing. You have to be really honestly quite sure on your timings, and we all know how rose tinted most property people are on timings. So
to be honest, Dom, drop me a message. I can get you a better bridge than that, and I'm not on commission. I bloody should be. But drop me. Those terms are not particularly favourable in this environment. I'd rather be at 1.25% fixed, right, for 12. And if we can't beat that, then
Me too. Do you know what? This is an example of, again, something we always talk about a lot. The incentives are not aligned there. The bridger is incentivized for you to go over into months 8 to 11.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they could or might or what. Maybe I don't know. Call me cynical, skeptical. I don't know.
I'm 100% on board with that. Yeah. Oh, it does say in the terms we've got 14 days to provide you with your redemption figure. Yeah. We've all seen it. I've called it out in the past. I've been there.
I mean, I think Dom's normally pretty good with his timelines. I think he could be in and out on the vanilla refurb fairly quickly, but it's the exit that's going to be slow. He could tart it up and put it on in the window of a lovely estate agent on the high street, blah blah blah. But it could sit there for 4 months. Especially
Well, even if it's snapped up straight away, will the buyer perform? Will the buyer's lender perform?
Yeah.
You know, this is when Helen was talking very correctly and eloquently about certainty just before, which is so important. But there's an element of control which you lose. One of the reasons why I've always liked converting buildings to hold on to them is because you are your own exit. Right now, what are the downsides of it? Well, sometimes your revaluations are a little bit harsh versus if you'd sold them, right? You can only pull out 75-ish% of the money rather than realizing 100%. So all of those are factors that you have to consider. But you've got much more control over the refinance. But the problem is, even with the refinance, especially at the moment, you can only turn your documents around on the same day and keep chasing. They're the only things you can do. You aren't in control of their service levels. You aren't in control of market volatility, which means there's huge demand for loans. You aren't in control of. There's a real argument at the moment for looking at service levels over and above best rate, and second best rate is a fascinating. One of my favourite bits, if not my absolute favourite bit, in terms of my MBA. We did a module on behavioural science, and the guy who was the module leader, he'd written some fantastic stuff about this, and his central concept was the best is not the best, right? So this, you might have heard of the Morningstar 5-star curse, right? So when these funds get rated, ETFs, trackers, active managers, whatever, when they go from a 4-star rating to a 5-star rating, ton of money piles into them, right? Absolute ton of money. And what happens after that? So quite often the fund might have 800 million in it, and then it becomes a 5-star, and then it's got 8 billion in really, really quickly. So the same stuff doesn't work, right? It doesn't work at the same scale. There's new pressures, right? There's a massive amount of growth that they're not really in control of. So of course, what happens is the curse of the 5-star fund. A lot of those underperform. What you want is the 4-star funds that are bumping their heads against the glass ceiling, right? And if they become 5-star, sell them. Really, that's a much better strategy if you follow something as brute force simple as the Morningstar rating. It was one of the great moments of the opening part of that module. He said to me, he asked the question to the whole class. He said, "Who's better? The New England Patriots of, I think it was about 2010 or something, when the Patriots had a perfect season, 16-0, right? Or the Chicago Bulls of, I think it's 1992 Chicago Bulls, 72-10, their record in the NBA." And I was like, hands straight up, Chicago Bulls. And he said, "No one ever says that. Why did you say that?" And I was really annoyed because I'd stolen it. And I was like, well, mathematically, it's self-evident that it's much harder to win 72 and lose 10 games in an NBA season than it is to just win 16 events. Can be 16 pieces of luck. 82 events, it's much, much more likely that skill has shone through. And he was like, "Right, do you want to teach the module?" I was like, "No," but I love questions like that, because it's not the obvious answer necessarily, but it's very clearly the Chicago Bulls that were the true anomaly there.
It's the impact of variable change over the sample size, right? Because at 16 your position for variable change is limited, but at 72 or 82 the variable change across that time becomes more impactful. So you have to, if you're accounting for a larger size of input, then you have to account for it.
It's interesting because there's a lot of his research is based around a sort of the basic version of the algorithm would be, luck plus skill equals results. And of course, across sport is interesting because there's a lot of data, so you can get stuck into it. But of course, business is ultimately the application that you're looking at. And it's like, how do you And if you, I mean, the Buffett take on this, right? Because there was a couple of Uncle Warren bits in today's supplement. He's very, very useful in all situations, really, but very useful at the moment, definitely. But the Buffett take is, he buys into companies where he sees there are good stewards in place, good managers. He uses the word manager. Really, he's talking about the C-suite, right? He's talking about the chief exec and all the rest of it. But that he's buying the person, and I've seen that myself at a really small level when I've been buying businesses. And it's like, okay, you are buying. If assuming you're going to buy it as a going concern, the business is going to continue, right? You're buying the person. That's a big part of the investment that you're in. So all their good points and all their flaws, and you can tell a lot, because ultimately, if you're buying a business that's distressed, why is it distressed? Yeah, is it partially because of the person? Can you turn that around? How willing is the person to make some changes in terms of this, that, and the other? Or is it more of a genuine exit, retirement, sale, blah, 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 in which case there might well be a really, really good team of people already in situ that you can work with. And in many ways, that's the bit that where you really do step up a level when you're buying businesses versus buying properties, because the property, it's really up to you how well it's managed, how well it's looked after, how well it's maintained, right? It's up to you. Yeah. If it's remote, there are a number of things you need to do that are, levels above. If it's round the corner and you can pop round every day or whatever. But it's up to you to sort those things out. If there's other people involved, there's all sorts of extra factors, volatility, nuances, behavior, ego, God knows what else, and that's just me.
It is that question though that gets asked a lot, and we were asked it when I was back recording the new program, this Venture Visionaries. It gets asked about property and property deals, and it's the same question for new for venture capital, for startups. Is it the person, or is it the deal? It's both. The person is absolutely, as you say, particularly if they're going to stay on, and you do see that a lot, don't you? When businesses are getting bought out, they have tie-ins. Why do they have tie-ins for the outgoing directors or owners? Because they are the people that they have the enormous wealth of capital, operational, all that capital, but also it's, the business, if they've started it, it's all about them, and it's so much value there.
Look, culture in terms of business takeover and management and change side of things is just incredible, because and the bigger the business in terms of number of people rather than necessarily in terms of the balance sheet, you put one person into a little team of 10 people, then that's 10 new relationships that need to form. Put one in a team of 25 people, or division of 25 people, it's 25 new relationships that need to form. And it's an absolute bloody guarantee that some people won't like each other, so they've got to be able to work effectively. But also, you can have a good culture and put in one bad personality, and it can really, really spoil the barrel. We really, really wreck the culture, and that's what you've got to be careful. So, taking over distressed, you're looking at changing the culture. The new broom has got to sweep clean, right? And you've got to try to make clear what you are, what your values are. Are those people going to come with you? Are you taking them with you, or are they leaving? Are they a skull by the side of the road? And that's ultimately a decision they've got to make, and you've got to put forward to them, because people get so nervous when business takeovers are happening. It's their biggest fear that they're going to get these sort of terrible bosses. But it's like, well, no, but what we are going to want is maybe some of the stuff you haven't been doing in terms of reporting, in terms of transparency. The question really to them is, do you want to get better? Do you want to improve? And you can see sometimes you get people and the relief on their face, because they've been desperate for this for years. But in reality, the exiting owner or owners are have been heading towards retirement, have been sweating things really hard to try and take out as much as possible because they haven't wanted to reinvest in the business and the people and all the rest of it. Sometimes you see people just look slightly blankly at you, like you just tried to run them over or something, you know, and then you're just thinking, well, they ain't going to be here in 6 months' time, then, are they? Let's face it, because they're not going to like the idea of a bit of a fire under them and try and grow and scale the business into something much more meaningful and interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I really liked your post on LinkedIn this week where you talked about Genesis and you gave a shout out to one of the ladies that runs there, and, you know, how helpful and how well she's managed stuff. I think that, you know, I think it's so important for employees and people you're working with in general, you know, recognition. We're human. We all like that. Everybody's got an ego, however big or small it is, and they like that pat on the back. So just, you know, recognizing somebody's impact is, I think is really powerful.
I think I have a gigantic weakness and a gigantic strength around people, and it's the same. It's two sides of the same coin, because I genuinely really care and want them to. If you work hard with me, for me, however you want to frame it, I desperately want you to win so much it burns inside me, right? And I want you to get what you deserve, yeah? If you don't, get off the bus, because there's no room for passengers here, guys. You know, if you mean what you say and you want to go forward, I will push you out of your comfort zone on self-development, right? I will push you wherever you let me push you. Yeah. If you say it and you don't mean it, you'll regret it, or I'll find out very, very quickly, you know? So it's a gigantic strength, because then the problem is you then take things personally. It's hard not to internalize and take things personally. You get used to it as you go through. It's sad to say, but you get used to it as more people let you down to an extent, because it's like, okay, it happens. And also sometimes it's like, just put your hand up and say, you know, I would never mean it. I would never knowingly do this, that, or the other, but I can understand that you might be somewhere thinking, why this, why that? You must communicate with me, and the door's always open for you to communicate with me. I will listen, but also we might have a chat where, if the chat is around, like, I know people who manage some quite big companies and have to have quite a lot of compensation conversations, and the stuff they've been dealing with this year has just been like, well, I need a 40% pay rise, and it's like, I need is not how we start this conversation, right? There's a lot of things I'd like, and I understand you'd like that, but why? How does the business afford it? Because what other wages are we cutting in order to afford that? Have you done 40% more work than last year, etc., etc., etc.? Because we're trying to build something sustainable here, not one where someone just puts their hand up and go, I'm on 40% pay rise. Well, jolly good. Now, we can get to that point, and in order to get to that point, you're going to need to do this, and this, which is great. Are you up for it? No, not really. Well, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out, I think, is the vernacular in those situations.
It's also actually not the way to start a chat with an investor. You'd be amazed. Actually, you wouldn't be amazed. It wouldn't surprise you, really. The amount of DMs I get. I need this much money to do this and do this. Do you really? Well, that's fascinating. I'm the wrong person to be speaking to. Goodbye. Or actually, most of the time, I don't even respond. I really, if you don't recognize that that's the wrong opening of a direct message, then I honestly, I don't even have 30 seconds to waste replying to you. Because I've tried it in the past before, and they're the people that just get attitudey. Oh, well, what's wrong? Like, okay, move along.
I'm trying to educate you. If you don't want to be educated,
I know. It's like, maybe you'd like to do it. No. Okay.
I've got to share this. It's always nice when someone shouts out a couple of my favorite people on the planet, Ben Nichols and Angie. There you go. Yeah. They're super anyway. So this message is no surprise to anyone.
No, and that's it. And it's that listening to. That's what you won't get. Depending on the size, the asset or portfolio. You know, I have this conversation with vendors and say, look, you know, sell it to a fund, right, on paper, because Helen mentioned the E word. A lot of this at this stage, when people are exiting from a big portfolio, it is ego, right? The marginal 500 grand, million, it doesn't make any difference to them.
No.
You know, they're walking away with so much, they don't know how to spend it anyway. Part of the reason they haven't sold it before is they don't know what to do with the money. The classic property problem, what do I do with the money when I've sold it? Because it's already in an income generating asset that is appreciating over time, you know. But what you won't get from the fund after the 12 plus months of legals and all the messing around that there'll be, and all the 58 trillion collateral warranties, and you know, the blood of your firstborn available on tap or whatever, you know, what you'll get from me is you get someone who actually listens to you. Yeah. You'll get someone who actually cares about what you get in your pocket at the end of it, and you'll get someone who takes into account what do you want. And you can't have, we know you can't, yeah, all right, full asking price tomorrow in a head bag or whatever. It's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? So we can all be realistic that there's a bit of a trade-off here, but let's talk about the bits that are really important. And that's got me, you know, so many deals at acceptable prices with the vendor walking away happy. And you're like, that's how a deal should be done. That's absolutely how a deal should be done. You're not going to get that from xyz.com, even if they've theoretically said they're paying this, you know?
No,
it's a great point.
It's making me think about, so the one deal that I did do on Elevator, well, agreed to do on Elevator, was buying a hotel up north with a guy that already did kind of serviced accommodation and had a few, you know, it had a good operating model in that. So he was going to be a good pair of hands in kind of running that, and we could see where we could add value and optimize occupancy where there was a lot of inefficiency in the cost base, the existing cost base. So it looked like a nice little deal. And I mean, obviously I wasn't in charge of the negotiations, else things might have gone differently, but the vendors just had a number in their head, and that's what they stuck to. And I don't think we got across like they had this business for, you know, I don't know, over 20 years. And it's like, don't tell me, I just don't believe it, that somebody that's had a business for that long, their only consideration is the number. It's if it is, they are sociopathic or narcissistic. So let's not rule that out, because we know there's a lot of those people around. But I'm just like, and this is where I was trying to kind of take the conversation. Like, you are leaving a legacy here, and we can help continue, build, grow that legacy. Anyway,
when we bought Genesis, that was a genuine legacy development project that someone was selling. You know, someone had built it on behalf of a charitable foundation. Now, the negotiation was terse. It was difficult. You know, they've got to work. It's Rod and I at the other end of things, but they really upset me at one point. I always think it's Rod who's going to blow his stack, but then sometimes it ends up being me. There was one phone call we had that was particularly difficult, where they basically said, you're not doing what you said you were going to do. And if there's one way to upset me, it's to say that, right? And I was like, hold on a minute. I'm looking at the heads of terms that we send over, right? They say this, and this. Tell me which one of those we're not doing at the moment. Silence on the phone, right? Because it wasn't true, but they had reframed things in their heads. You know, and it was just, interesting and difficult. But the legacy side of it, I was absolutely 100% genuine with the vendor, because it was me who went and looked around the site first of all, and I was like, this is just incredible. You know I couldn't have developed it, you know, in terms of the network and the grant money and the favors that have been called in to get it done. You know, an incredible beast of a thing, not something you wouldn't. Is it beautifully architectured, for example? No, it's not. But is it an incredible pocket of spaces that can really make a difference to a vibrant local community and have have a bit of impact and be a bit of something important in that part of the world? Yeah, hell yeah, it is, right? Right. So how do we then go about, and that's the sort of multi-year, multi-layer plan for it. And a lot of this is more heart than it is necessary commercial viability, right? But also it's given me a chance to sharpen my skills doing things that I've never contemplated before. Plus, I always wanted to own a bowling alley. So, I mean, tick that box as well. I mean, what's not to like, right? What's not to like? But the people, and that's what you find so often, because it is, a lot of places are, live in their own little bubbles. When you get out into the provinces, it's just the way that it is. Solihull can be a little bit like that, but it's quite large, so it struggles to be it's quite hard to be large and cliquey at the same time, but the people, when they realise you're being genuine, you're being honest, sometimes they don't want to take the medicine, for sure. They'll tell you that. Sometimes they don't like the idea that you're doing X or Y, but when you break it down into, well, what the alternative is going to be, what was happening before, when no one's looking after the site, it's falling apart, no one wants to come around, you're embarrassed to do your job here. Do you want that? Do you want what you had before, or do you want us to move forward together? And you get the people who do put their trust in you to an extent, but do want to move forward. And then it's like, great, because that gives me the drive to keep, trying to push them as far as they can go. And I do really, it's something that I never realized, maybe I've grown out of being a narcissistic sociopath. I don't know. Maybe I'm just growing into it. I'm not sure. But on the consulting side and on the personal development side with people, I do really enjoy other people's wins. As long as I can claim at least one of the credit, then I'm perfectly happy. So perhaps that is just my dysfunctional personality shining through, but it is a lot of fun.
I don't think that's. I mean, yes, it's ego, but is it? It's selfish. Just like, I think we all have a need. Actually, I don't study Tony Robbins. I'm just pulling something out the air, but he talks about like contribution, doesn't he? Something like that. I think we all want to know we've made a difference, we've had an impact. I don't think that counts as well. Obviously, on the extreme, it would count as pure narcissism, but in a holistic sense, I think that's very natural.
But it can be positive for all of us to have contributed to each other, can't it? And the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. You are, if you don't believe that, then you are a narcissist or a sociopath, right? But it is self-evidently true, because you look at what teams of 3 and 4 and 6 and 8 people can achieve, and you just think, I'm involved in stuff these days, right? Absolutely no. There's no way I could have done that on my own. No way. And if I had done it on my own, there would have been bits in there where I really wouldn't have enjoyed them. I wouldn't have done them anywhere near as well as the people who are involved have been doing them.
Yeah.
That's why teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the importance of knowing yourself and knowing the strength of who you're working with and getting the right people in the right positions. Yeah. Again, very like holistic approach. Yeah.
Yeah. Still working on mastering Uncle Warren's techniques of buying the right businesses at the right prices. But yeah, you got to start somewhere, haven't you? You got to start somewhere.
It's in the doing that you find the recipe, right? It's only when you start to make the sauce that you think, oh, it needs a bit more salt here, a bit of basil there, a bit this, that, a bit the other. Yeah. Theory only gets you so far, sadly.
But the doing it's the fun bit, right? The doing it is definitely the fun bit.
Yeah.
So what have you got going on in the week coming up? What's on the decks?
Oh, it's been Piotr is on a wellness, mindfulness, retreaty thing, which he does fairly regularly, which is why he's probably the more balanced of the two of us, in fairness. So some value being gained there. So I'm steering the ship without a chartsman there pointing me in a direction. So we've got some spaces in the auction buyers club. So we sent out an email to people that have inquired previously or people that have kind of commented on what we do in the club. So I've been interviewing people that have booked some time in, and next week I'm doing some logistical bits around a dinner that we're putting together with current members and potential members, so that there's a bit of a taster evening.
Ooh, when's that?
That's a good idea.
I thought it's a soft touch, because then, you know, it's quite a commitment to join the club. It's a time commitment more than it's a capital commitment, and it requires a focus. So getting people in front of people that have achieved and are enjoying it, and you know, was a good idea. And then I'm talking to some vendors about selling their property at auction, which is always an interesting set of conversations. I spoke to somebody last week, and they said, "Oh yeah, I just want to get rid of this. It's underperforming. I can use the cash better elsewhere." I was like, "No problem at all." Came back with the valuation, and they really didn't agree with what I came back with. So clearly not motivated enough. But it's always an interesting conversation, because everyone, when they think about auctions, they always think about buyers, you know, having to take some of the pain, having to take a hit, and it being an uncomfortable process. People forget how uncomfortable a process selling at auction can be for a seller. And especially at the moment, when you're seeing increased volumes, decreased sales, the pricing has to be absolutely on point, and it has to be in the right auction to get anywhere near what you're hoping to get. You always have to remind people that the guide and reserve that you're offering isn't an indication of the property's value. It's marketing BAMF at the end of the day, and you're kind of hoping that other people are going to look at it, be inspired by what they can do with your asset, and pay more than what you're happy to sell it for. Fingers crossed. Dominic has made a point. Yeah, soft touch. Obviously, the dinner is at the Ivy, so that shows how much of a soft touch it is. I won't touch softly next time, Dom, if you prefer that. Set your preferences quite alarmingly strong in that message. Well done. What about you, Helen? What's the next week look like for you?
I've got lots of calls. I've had a whole lot. It's funny how these things go in phases. Loads of people contacted me about I wouldn't call it mentoring. I'd never call myself a mentor, but kind of like coaching, consultancy. Some is for business, some is kind of one-on-one, and people at kind of different levels of their property journey. Yuck, horrible word. So some more calls, kind of connected discovery calls. Am I the right person for that person? I think lots of people, you know, see you have an idea about you, you know, because I am quite active on social media, and like, oh, it'd be great to work with you. But some of them I'm like, actually, I've recommended the your boardroom club, Adam. I'm like, I'm just not the right person for you at that stage. Like, yes, I can help you, but am I going to give, like, am I going to over deliver on value? Probably not. So I won't touch that. I'm kind of, you know, I think actually we're all like that, which is why we're kind of different to a lot of people. Loud.
That's such an interesting point, and I think that is really well made, because I do think this, you know, a lot of stuff that sells in the mentoring space, as they self-appoint themselves, let's say, there's two ways to do it, isn't there? How can I possibly charge as much as humanly possible? Yeah. And then don't really care whether I deliver or not, but focus on selling the product. Or how do I make sure, also some of what Jay said, right? There's a time commitment as well as a capital commitment. I want the people who value both. I want the people who can afford it, because I don't want people putting themselves under financial pressure in order to be, and then I'm not going to be the right person to help them. Because when I say things like, we just got to do better deals, mate, do some more phone calls, do some more this, do some more that, it's not going to be that helpful, really. You can get anyone to beat you up for free. You don't need to pay me to do it. But the flip side is the way that you've just described, where, yes, there's a price that recognises where you are in that marketplace, where the competition are. They're inevitably more expensive. and you're cheaper and deliver more value, because that is where your values are. That's what's important to you. And commercially, that may well sound really stupid to some of the people who may or may not have been on property TV with you in the bars, Helen. I couldn't possibly comment on any of their names or ties or suits or other previous careers or anything like that. And we would disagree. And I'm pretty sure they've got more money than me, so maybe they're right. Maybe they're right, yeah. But I'm also pretty sure I'm quite happy I'm not them and I'm me. So maybe I'm right? Who knows? Who knows? But I better shut up before I get myself into any trouble, really. I don't want to go to a place I can't come back from. So.
You sleep better at night. Or actually, no, let's rephrase that. You sleep better at night with your conscience. They don't have consciences, so they do actually sleep quite well, apparently. But hey.
I think you've probably nailed it there.
It's just to follow on from that point. It's one of the reasons why we've been having these calls with people that have kind of reached out saying they want to join the club, because the club joining process is there's an application form, then there's a formal interview, then there's a decision. So what we're doing on this one is, because normally most people that join the club are by recommendation from former members or current members. It's very much tight like that. But this time when we kind of went out, put hooks in the water to see who came out, it was kind of like, well, let's have a chat before we do all of those things.
Yeah. To
see if it's worth us sending you the brochure with the application form, with the link to the 30-minute Zoom. Before you go through all of those steps, let's just see if it's right for you. And I think of the 7 or 8 calls, I think maybe 3 people, they were just like, yeah, fair enough. This is really not right for me. I haven't got the capacity for this, X, Y, and Z. So perfect. Well, if that changes in the future, reach out, but don't join just because, so you can say you're in a private members club. Join if you think you're going to do deals, because that's the environment. The club is you do deals in this club. It's not you don't go through a syllabus. There's no finish this part of the training and then join the call. It's not that. It's you're doing deals or you're not enjoying yourself in the club.
It's so exactly like how Rod and I speak to someone about boardroom club. It's going to be a really good and worthwhile process. But if you think the first 3 months are going to be anything other than bloody hard work, then don't bother. We're kidding ourselves if we think we did. The funniest one we ever did was a recommendation, and we did the deep dive for someone. So that's how we kick off. We do like a 3-hour, myself, Rod, and them, and formulate the strategic plan that we're going to be. And we got to the end of it, and Rod absolutely crushed it like he normally does, and starts talking about. So then we go into the monthly meets and the accountability, and the guy's just stopped. He's like, "What do you mean? What do you mean the accountability?" And he's like, "Well, you're going to need to. We've come up with these targets that you've got to hit. You've got to do your KPIs, and that's going to." And he's like, "Well, I've never been accountable to any." He was so affronted. You could see physically, and eventually we end up saying, like, "Look, do you know what? We'll just refund some of your first quarter's subscription here, because ultimately this is not going to work, because I'm not having you and Rod just like this. Is not going to work. No. So thank you, but genuinely upset that someone would hold him accountable for things. I was like, I don't think you understand the power of this, but each to their own. And it's kind of like, when you get the people who you've kind of offended their ego by suggesting they could do any better, and it's kind of like, how do you ever go to the gym or read a book, or do you do those things? Is that a thing you do? I don't know, but funny, and always good to find out. So that's the point of having the relatively robust process, right? Find out sooner rather than later, rather than put the bad apple in the barrel.
Exactly. Be very clear about that up front. I literally had a conversation with, every time, but just like, this is what I expect. I expect you to listen. If you're not going to listen, like, honestly, I ain't wasting my freaking time. I expect you to have humility in terms of listening and taking on board what I have to contribute. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not asking for a yes person. I actually appreciate those when people are like, well, no, and why is that? I appreciate that mental, challenge. but I expect you to not come from a place of ego, like, no, that's not the way, exactly like that. No, that's not the way I do it. Well, okay, we can't do this. I just value my time too much to work with knobheads, basically.
I think if I recall that call that I'm thinking of with the guy, and when he said, like, well, no one's ever held me accountable, I'm pretty sure what Rod said was, well, how's that worked out for you so far? And that's when I knew this couldn't go any further. You know, okay, well, let's just shake hands and wash up, gentlemen. We're done here. It was nice. Enjoyed it a lot. See you later.
What's your what have you got lined up for this week, Adam? What's on the chopping block?
So I'm having a relatively restricted week because we're away in Yorkshire. So we've got some friends who live overseas, and when they come over, they tend to hire a big house that can accommodate as many people as possible. So there's normally people sort of coming in and out, lots of uni friends, many of which have got kids these days. So there's all sorts. There's a range from a 6-month baby. I don't know how I found a quiet part of the house, but here's a rather. I'll show you the library. Here we go. There's a real.
Wow.
There's some really genuine. You feel like you should have a smoking jacket on and a cigar sitting in here. To be honest, it's a perfect. It's a proper Cluedo house. There's a billiard room. There's a there's a scullery. There's other rooms where I've had to try and ask ChatGPT what this room should be called. You know, it's a real blend. So I'm on relatively restricted duty on the phone and messages. Got a couple of bits that I've got to do. I never like leaving my emails alone for too long, to be honest, because the worst thing about taking a few weeks off is the thought of 6,000 emails when I come back. It's not for me. So work-life integration, I think someone said to me a few years ago, and I thought, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's fine. I'm comfortable with it. So I would say lots of nice walks around the Yorkshire Dales, whatever. But if you, looking at the precipitation forecast, I'm not convinced that's going to be doable. But we're in a lovely little place which has got a castle and also has got one of the very high-end horse racing trainers' stables nearby. So there's lots of horses, very well turned out, and I'm sure significantly valuable, tottering around, and very interesting stuff. So nice part of the world. So making the most of that, hopefully with some genuine sunlight at some point. But that's not guaranteed. So let's see.
Send you some from Malta. Take some of ours. We've got this heat wave for another week. It's set to drop to just 33 next weekend. So hopefully I won't have melted by then.
I'm joining you on location. This is my new garden office.
Ah,
I've been really wondering, and I know I'm not the only one wondering, is that a meteorite behind you?
The big disc? No, that is a slice of petrified red oak, like so it kind of falls into like a bog a couple of 100 million years ago, and it's harder than stone. It's almost granite, so it takes a lot to kind of cut through it. But this is a meteorite.
Oh. Whoa.
Those are called olivines, so they're almost transparently see-through. So finding something to mount that. But that's I'm trying to find a separate use for that because I need that stand for something else. So I'm still unpacking my office. I've got my books. I've still got to bring some more across because I'm hobbling around at the moment. And I've got to put up my it's going to be an entire wall of fuck you. So I've got these disc plates. I don't know if people's heard of these. This one. Here we go. So I've got 12.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
12.
I feel like you should have like a feature, like a case. You can get like a case, like a frame. Actually, you can get the ones that open up, and you could like have a different feature every week.
Slide across, yes, yeah. They all have the word "fuck" in them, so I don't know how I'm going to get past. a great deal of that. But yeah, and then I've got my.
It's very, very J. Howard, isn't it? It's so J. Howard it hurts.
Well, I mean, look up here. I've got these are limited edition. This is these 6 folios there. They're sections of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. But all of the artwork is done by Salvador Dali before he died.
Wow.
So yeah, and so I've managed to get all of my limited editions, a couple of bits up there. So pretty much that whole top row is all different versions of the Divine Comedy. Some of them are as early as 1836. 1836 is the earliest copy that I have. So
wow. I think Adam's gone to get something from his library. Well, it's not his.
He's got, yeah. I mean, I've just got a bookshelf. He's got a bloody library. It's typical for Adam to do a one-up. Do you know what I mean? I'm not shocked.
Well, this is obviously not mine like yours, but if you can just see what we found on the shelf the other night when we were setting the fire in here, Woodfall's Law of Landlord and Tenant 17th edition. So I think
they knew you were coming.
Not this whole book. So containing the statutes and cases down to Michaelmas Day 1902. So basically before anything that has any relevance these days. So this entire book of a significant size.
Pre-Law of Property Act 1925, of which all modern day law is property law is based.
Exactly. Who's with us this week said the other night when we found it on the shelf, word for word.
Wow.
1,158 pages of firewood, I'm afraid, but nonetheless, there's some interesting stuff in here, that's for sure.
Cool.
Well, I've got some some Edgar Allan Poe, which is 1856, in that corner there. And I've got some William Shakespeare coming out of storage, which is like I've got a modern day book of the William Shakespeare, but I've got some, because I've got some of it in storage, so I've got to get the old classics out. And then I've got to put my gym together. I've got a rowing machine and some weights, and I'm thinking about getting a boxing bag as well, you know, to help with the man breasticles then. So this was like 24. 37, 24, 37, 24. It's horrendous. Gravity's done me dirty, I'm afraid. So what a way for this call to take a massive turn. Piotr Rusinek will be back with us next week, which is going to be a blessing for all of us because he does bring a little bit more structure to the whole thing. I won't be here next week. Next week is we've got the Dirk 1A family conference.
Oh, cool.
So there's I think 10 or 12 families. Some of them are traveling in from Europe, and they do talks around the genetics and specific issues that the kids face. So I will be gone for the whole of next weekend. So
hope it goes well.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
We will
clean the language.
I would say so, but the beautiful people of the internet will miss you, my friend.
Oh. All right, I think we let these good people get on with the rest of their weekend.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Sunday. Thank you, everybody. Thanks
Cheerio.
for your comments.
Bye.
Have a good weekend, all.